Hello everyone, this is part 2 of What If Naruto was trained by Black Zetsu, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Naruto wandered into the forest surrounding his usual training area with Zetsu, absently keeping an eye out for the plant man while his mind roamed. He had just passed the second exam to become an official genin, and while the outcome had eventually been favorable, the path to that conclusion had been littered with pitfalls. Not for the first time, he wished that Zetsu would teach him something more substantial than botany or philosophy. While learning about plants was interesting and useful, he supposed, when in the field with limited supplies, and being taught to think for himself was proving even more advantageous, it hardly amounted to the proper ninja training that he so drastically needed and desired. That point had just been proven rather harshly. His sensei, his Uchiha Sasuke's, and Haruno Sakura's sensei, had turned out to be a man with silver hair by the name of Hatake Kakashi. The only notable features about the man, aside from the fact that his hair color gave him the appearance of being prematurely aged, were that he wore a face mask and had his hate slanted so that it covered his left eye. Naruto honestly had no idea what purpose that served, but was loath to point it out given Black Zetsu's propensity to ridicule his own taste in orange clothing. The test Kakashi had given his trio of genin had started the previous day with an order to not eat breakfast, as they were likely to throw it up during survival training. After the fiasco of listening to Mizuki and having his error pointed out to him by Black Zetsu, Naruto had, rather wisely, decided that obeying the simple behest of not eating that morning was a stupid idea. There didn't really seem to be any purpose to not having breakfast, and really, wasn't it a bad idea to do strenuous activity on an empty stomach? Nor did he see any way for Kakashi to know whether or not he had followed the instructions, so he had arrived at the training grounds in a relatively good mood, which had promptly soured when Kakashi had forced him to wait for him. Unfortunately, the next step, grabbing one of two bells strapped to Kakashi's hip, had dampened his spirits even further. He wasn't stupid enough, anymore, to believe that any of the three genin actually had a shot at getting a bell. Zetsu's proficiency at throwing senbon and his seemingly infinite knowledge of, well, everything, displayed the gap between himself and the plant man quite sufficiently. As Kakashi was sure to be on a level close to his tutor, albeit probably with a completely different skill set, Naruto hadn't held much hope of completing the exercise assigned to them. Still, that knowledge hadn't prevented him from at least putting forth the effort to try and get a bell. Using his shadow clones had definitely been a good idea, though Kakashi had been sure to throw off any of his meager attempts at taijutsu by constantly replacing himself with the blonde doppelgangers. The fact that he had been led into such a rudimentary trick as a rope tied to a tree branch had been embarrassing, but not altogether harmful. That didn't mean that he was going to include it in his report to Zetsu, though. He had silently watched Sasuke's attempt at getting one of the bells, followed by Sakura's fainting spell after finding the Uchiha buried up to his neck in dirt. Shortly after that point, the timer had gone off, and Kakashi had tied Sakura, who'd done the least to get a bell, to a post, told the trio that the secret to beating him had been teamwork, and given the two boys strict instructions to not feed her. After lunch, they were to try for the bells once more. There hadn't really been much time to think about the silver-haired man's words. Sasuke had opted into sharing his lunch with Sakura, and Naruto, more because he wasn't as hungry as the others than because he thought all three of them being energized would help them get the bells, had followed the other boys' example. At that point, Kakashi had appeared, and after putting on a facade of anger, he had informed the trio that they had passed. However pleased he was by his success, it was Kakashi's parting words that kept ringing in Naruto's head, driving him to seek out his dual-tone tutor. Those who break the rules and codes of the ninja are called trash. But, you know what? Those who don't take care of their comrades are lower than trash. The teamwork speech had been hard to swallow. That last message, delivered with such conviction, had completely contradicted the very breakthrough that he had had 2 nights ago with Black Zetsu. Hello, child. Finished training with your team, Naruto-kun. Speak of the devil. Devils. Gar. Whatever. Yes. No. I don't know. You seem troubled. Naruto frowned, though the expression wasn't directed at Zetsu's disturbing ability to read him so well. I'm confused, he admitted. I met with my team today, and my sensei said something that was weird. What did he say? Prompted White Zetsu. That people who break ninja rules are trash, but that those who don't take care of their comrades are worse than trash, the blonde recited. He seemed to really emphasize teamwork. Black Zetsu made a sound that Naruto thought might be a bark of laughter. Unsurprising. Really. Konoha's shinobi are firm believers in the wall of fire, Black Zetsu explained. It is a faith that causes them to risk themselves in an effort to protect those weaker than them, whether they are the next generation or the people working with them on a mission. You don't agree with it, Naruto stated, though the hesitance in his voice made it sound more like a question. Black Zetsu's snort of derision told him it was a stupid one to voice, most likely because he already knew the answer. What should it matter to you if your teammates perish on a mission? Does it affect your well-being or performance? Well, what if they're your friend? This time, the laughter emanating from Zetsu's darker side was far more recognizable. Are your teammates your friends? Naruto opened his mouth to reply, but then closed it, thinking. Kakashi was his superior, and a too recent addition to Naruto's world to be considered anything more than that. If the man's beliefs were anything to go by, Naruto could trust the Jonin to protect him, but he wasn't sure he could classify their relationship as anything beyond a strictly student-teacher one. Sasuke was a rival, or had been, at any rate. He was a measuring stick by which Naruto could judge, had always judged, in a way, his own progress, though now that he thought about it, trying to track his own abilities against that of someone who was also growing wasn't a very accurate gauge of how far he'd come. Using someone whose relative power had hit a sort of plateau, Kakashi or Zetsu, perhaps, was a better choice to judge his own improvements against. But even beyond that new revelation, Sasuke was a very aloof individual, never partaking in group activities the academy hadn't forced him into, and choosing to distance himself from others. His very nature would make it difficult, if not impossible, to become friendly with him, and even his teamwork mindset during the Bell test had only come around because Kakashi hadn't really given him any other option in the matter. Sakura was the girl he had a crush on, but now that he was trying to analyze her objectively, he realized that he had no reason to be interested in her. Sure, she was a good student, and even kind of cute, and if she applied herself, she could probably be a decent kunoichi, but her treatment of him was rather poor. All of his efforts to be nice to her over the years, as over the top and perhaps obnoxious as they had been, had gone to waste. Sakura possessed eyes for Sasuke and only Sasuke. During the Bell test, she hadn't even made an appearance until Kakashi had trapped Sasuke beneath the earth, and after waking up from passing out, she had immediately helped her crush out of his predicament. Naruto, hanging from the rope trap nearby, plotting his next move, had been conveniently ignored by her throughout the entire exercise. They weren't friends, they were just people he had been partnered with to continue his ninja career. It was a little weird to acknowledge that Zetsu's method of forcing him to think things through had given him insight that, several weeks ago, he had never possessed. Seeing things from an objective, unbiased point of view was rather eye-opening. He made a mental note to not complain about Zetsu's teaching methodology the next time the thought cropped up. The comprehension must have shown on his face, for White Zetsu said, "It looks like you understand." "Yeah, I'm surprised you asked us such a question," White Zetsu observed. "We thought our position on such things was made clear to you." "It was. He frowned again, scratching the side of his head. "Sometimes I forget that you're set in your ways, and, I dunno, it's weird to have people teach you conflicting things. You're quite impressionable." Thanks. It was not a compliment. It is a handicap. Once you get an idea in your head, it sticks there, elaborated White Zetsu. However, the new idea tends to dislodge any of the old ones you have, making you lose focus of what your original opinion was. This matter is a good example of that. So, Naruto began, working through this train of thought, if you don't like me learning other people's opinions, why didn't you just say that your opinion was the right one? You should be able to learn these lessons on your own merit. What purpose is served by feeding you the answers? Experience is the hallmark of learning. That's true. We are also not so arrogant as to believe that our philosophy is the only correct one. Naruto's expression must have displayed his confusion, For White Zetsu continued, it is merely the one that we have concluded best suits our life based on past experiences. Villages such as Konohagakure and Awagakure would have not survived long by adhering to principles such as the wool of fire or the wool of stone if they were not successful ideologies. We simply believe them to be foolish faiths to put stock in. You're confusing. White Zetsu tittered lightly, and when Black Zetsu spoke, Naruto could almost imagine that he was scowling. And you're mindless, he retorted, a trait which we are trying to rectify. Naruto peered at his mentor curiously, unfazed by the insult. Black Zetsu had delivered the line without any of the venom he usually put into his snarls, and so Naruto knew that he didn't really mean it. But the green-haired man had a strange habit of talking in circles and contradictions, and so sometimes it took a bit of thought to get to the point he was trying to make. Zetsu seemed to be trying to tell him that while there were other ideals people clung to, it was his ideal of relying only on himself that provided the most accurate representation of what to expect from life. Experience was a better teacher than pretty words that had no evidence to back him up, as Kakashi's parting philosophy tutored, and Naruto's exploits had taught him that, well, that Zetsu's philosophy held more water than Kakashi's. Or Konoha's. After all, who aside from the Hokage and Iruka had ever protected him, or gone out of their way to help him? He was alone, and unlikely to turn Sasuke and Sakura into his comrades, given the personalities. Not that that would prevent him from trying, he was nothing if not stubbornly persistent, but honesty forced him to admit that the likelihood was slim. Once again, he was struck by the realization that Zetsu's methods really were quite effective. Hey, Zetsu, how long have you been alone? The pupil in the white side's yellow eye shifted so that it was closer to Black Zetsu. Naruto imagined that the two halves were holding a private conversation. Over 13 years now, he replied. Why? Curious, responded the blonde, returning to his introspection. Zetsu had been alone for longer than he had been alive. That was a little sad, given the events of his own life, but it also explained why the plant man was so attached to his ways. With over a decade of being by himself, it was no wonder Zetsu scoffed at any philosophies that promoted friendship and reliance upon others. For a brief moment, Naruto considered asking Zetsu if they were friends, but then decided against it. Not only was their relationship still relatively new, not to mention seeming more of a teacher-student one than anything else, Naruto wasn't sure he wanted to hear what Zetsu considered him. Given Zetsu's personality, the plant man was unlikely to deem Naruto his friend, and given the only partially successful quest the previous day to try and befriend Ino, the blonde didn't think he could stand being rejected, again, especially not by the person he was currently closest to. If he wanted friends or comrades, it would be more prudent to start with the people his own age that he already had established positive relationships with. Given that most of his peers tended to mock or ignore him, his options were rather limited. Despite her hesitance, Ino seemed like the safest bet, as she at least seemed willing to give him a chance to prove himself, and as an added bonus, her teammates were Nara Shikamaru and Akamaiki Choji, people whom he had hung around in the past and got along with decently. Plus, it was possible that he could gain insight into the process of strengthening bonds with his own teammates by observing the other three genin in action. It wasn't exactly what Zetsu wanted him to do, but then again, the former Kusanin had just admitted that his philosophy wasn't the only right one. If the plant man could be wrong about one thing, though, as it stood now, his arguments all held a lot of merit, who was to say he couldn't be wrong about others? Would it really be such a bad idea to try to turn Sasuke and Sakura into his comrades, to make friends? Black Zetsu had already stated that Naruto shouldn't trust his opinions, he should trust only what made the most sense. If experience was the hallmark of learning, then the blonde should at least be willing to give his teammates the opportunity to become comrades and/or friends before making any final decision about them prematurely. Naruto broke out of his musing to find Zetsu staring at him, a speculative look on the white side of the former Kusanin's face. He blinked, mildly unnerved by the scrutiny, and stammered, I'm gonna go do something. Is that okay? You do not need our permission to leave. Our lesson will merely be postponed. Seek us out when you desire another one. The blonde was a little surprised at how tame his tutor's reaction to his leaving was, but tried not to focus on it. He nodded once and hastily left the forest, uncomfortably aware of Zetsu's far too knowledgeable yellow eyes on his back as he did so. LLL. Naruto tried to organize his thoughts as he made his way toward the 12th training ground. He had stopped by Yamanaka Flowers just to make sure that Ino wasn't working, and the man behind the counter, a man the blonde presumed to be Ino's father, had pointed him in the direction of Team 10's training area upon inquiring about Ino's whereabouts. The Jinchuriki entered the 12th training ground and found his fellow blonde standing next to a boy with dark hair tied in a spiky ponytail, vaguely resembling a pineapple, who was reclining on the ground, hands laced behind his head. In comparison to Ino, who was avidly watching a spar between a chubby boy with light brown hair and a tall, sturdily built man Naruto guessed was Team 10's sensei, the dark-haired boy had his eyes closed, an aura of boredom and relaxation emanating off of him. Naruto coughed to announce his presence, and Ino whirled around, her long ponytail whipping through the air. Nara Shikamaru opened one brown eye lazily and grunted, Naruto, in greeting before returning to his previous activity of trying to sleep. Hey Shikamaru, he greeted, before turning to the boy's teammate and adding, Ino. Naruto, she returned, and there was a definite note of caution in her voice, as if she was unsure why he was around. He was distinctly reminded of her hesitance and skepticism when he had entered the flower shop the other day, and knew that turning Ino into his friend would require a lot of work to change the opinion she had of him from the academy. What are you doing here? He shrugged. Kakashi-sensei dismissed us for the day after we passed his stupid bell test, so I thought I'd come see how you guys are doing. He paused before continuing, actually, I also had some things I wanted to ask you. Not now, she hissed, but the damage was already done. Shikamaru's drawling voice interjected itself into the conversation. Wait a minute, Naruto, you came here to talk to Ino. His brown eyes, both now open with interest, narrowed suspiciously. When did you two get so chummy? Naruto opened his mouth to reply, but Ino beat him to the punch. Naruto's taken an interest in flowers, she shot back hotly. He's manly enough to not be afraid of what others might think of him taking up a girly hobby. Maybe if you weren't so lazy, you'd find it interesting, too. The Nara stared at his teammate for a long moment before closing his eyes with an uttered, troublesome. It's too much effort to argue with a woman. Ino made a disgusted noise in the back of her throat, but a deep voice cut across any remark she might have made. Oh, we have a visitor. Who's this? Naruto looked up to find Team 10's Jonin-sensei standing before him, Akamaiki Choji digging through a bag of chips at his side. The man was over 6 feet tall, with short black hair and a pointed beard, a cigarette hanging from his lips and a white sash decorated with the red kanji for fire, inscribed in a black circle with the only additions to the standard Jonin outfit of the hidden leaf. While the Jinchuriki took in the appearance of the man, Ino said, Asuma-sensei, this is Naruto. He graduated with us, and he's interested in becoming my protege at the flower shop. Is that so? Ino nudged him with her elbow, and Naruto managed, yes, Asuma-sensei. Sorry for interrupting, he added, attempting politeness for a good first impression. It's no problem. I was just about done with these guys anyway. He blew out a cloud of smoke. You can go, but we're meeting here at the same time tomorrow, Ino. Got it. You're welcome back here anytime you want, Asuma addressed Naruto, provided that it doesn't interfere with whatever Kakashi has planned for you. Naruto started at the man's knowledge of who his teacher was without knowing who he was, but then deduced from Asuma's slight grin that his identity had been known all along. Thanks, Asuma-sensei. Bye Choji, Shikamaru. Both boys offered him departing waves before Ino tugged on his arm and dragged him away. Geez, Ino griped before he could say anything, I can't believe you came to our training grounds to see me. There's no telling what Shikamaru and Choji would have thought if I hadn't come up with the excuse that you're interested in flowers. And it's a good thing Asuma-sensei seemed to like you, too, otherwise that might have gone pretty badly. How'd you even know where I was, anyway? Your dad, I think. You told my dad you were looking for me. I'm going to have to do so much damage control when I get home. Naruto tried, noticing that they weren't heading to Yamanaka Flowers as he had assumed. Where are we going? Away from prying eyes, was the response. Naruto remained silent as Ino eventually led him into a lush field of tall grass and simple flowers. The platinum blonde released his arm and seated herself somewhat huffily, gesturing for Naruto to do the same. When he had done so, she closed her eyes and took several deep breaths before reopening them. Her face held much less tension than when she had been speaking to her teammates and sensei. Look, I'm sorry about before. I'm not really comfortable enough yet with this whole situation to have it known that you and I are, she grappled about for the right words, on speaking terms. The admission didn't sting as much as Naruto thought it might, though he supposed that, realistically, as he and Ino had never really interacted before the previous day, it was foolish to believe that she would be willing to freely associate with him so soon. Still, how come? Well, my reputation is, she started, then realized that was the wrong thing to say, and said instead, your reputation, people like us normally don't mesh well, she decided on. It would just raise all sorts of questions that I don't want to have to answer yet, and Shikamaru already seems suspicious. He'll figure it out before long. The conversation was already going in the direction Naruto wanted, so he prodded it along by prompting, Shikamaru. But he was practically as bad as me back in the academy. He's a lot smarter than people give him credit for, Ino elaborated. Trust me, if anyone would find out that you and I are getting together more than normal, the word friends still seemed beyond her, at least for the moment, it'll be Shikamaru. Now they were getting somewhere. Ino had pretty much led the conversation directly into the area he wanted to discuss. Naruto tilted his head curiously. You seem to know a lot about Shikamaru even though we just got sorted into teams the other day. Ino nodded absently and picked at the surrounding grass, ripping individual blades into even smaller pieces. I've known Shikamaru and Choji for a couple of years now, she told him. Our dads were all on the same genin team as the previous generation of the Ino Shika-Cho formation. At Naruto's bewildered expression, Ino sighed. Members of the Yamanaka, Nara, and Akamaki clans have worked together since the era of the clan wars. She trailed off as Naruto's face became even more distorted with confusion. She grumbled exasperatedly. Honestly. Before the founding of the hidden villages, individual clans fought over rights, land, power, the usual. While most clans fought by themselves, the abilities of the Yamanaka, Nara, and Akamaki clans have always worked best when used in tandem, and so they banded together to pose a more powerful threat to their enemies. That was the birth of the Ino Shika-Cho combination. When the Uchiha and Senju clans founded Konoha, they extended invitations to several other clans to join them. One of them, the Sarutobi clan, invited the Yamanaka, Nara, and Akamaki clans to join alongside it. They all agreed, along with the Hyuga, Aburame, Inuzuka, and Kurama clans, and thus Konoha was born. She lifted her hand and jingled the small, silver, hoop earring dangling from her left lobe with her pointer finger. These earrings are my dad's. Each member of the next generation of Ino Shika-Cho is given a set by the previous generation from the time they become Genin to the time they become Chunin. After Shikamaru, Choji, and I become Chunin, a member of the Sarutobi clan, which Asuma Sensei is part of, will give us our own earrings, to symbolize our oath to work together, and protect both each other and Konoha. Naruto tried not to show Ino how impressed he was with the vast amount of information that she knew, but was sure that he failed. He wanted to ask if there had been an Uzumaki clan that had joined Konoha. Information about the family he had never known would certainly be interesting, but when he opened his mouth, he asked instead, how do you know all of that? His female companion gently ran a finger over the petals of a nearby yellow flower. Some things from the academy, others from my dad. When Ino didn't immediately say anything else, Naruto prompted, so I guess there's an important connection among yours, Shikamaru's, and Choji's families, huh? That's the simplest way of putting it, yes, Ino replied. Anyway, because of our dad's friendship and our clan's traditions, Shikamaru, Choji, and I were pretty much guaranteed to be put on the same team. Our families have gotten together for stuff plenty of times before, so we're pretty used to each other. We get along well enough, even if Shikamaru is a bit lazy and Choji could stand to lose some weight. Do you consider them your friends? The platinum blonde was silent for a long moment, fiddling again with the flora surrounding her. I suppose so, she admitted. I've never really thought about it in that way before. It's not like we're best friends or anything, but we have history and camaraderie. I doubt our team would work together as well as we're supposed to if we weren't friends. Naruto frowned a little at that answer. From the way Ino was speaking, her team had practically been destined to be together since she, Choji, and Shikamaru had been born, if not since at least the time they had entered the academy together. Their families had pre-established connections, and they had known the ins and outs of each other's personalities for several years because of those bonds. As far as teamwork went, Team 10 was stacked heavily in favor of being able to cooperate easily with each other. In fact, it sounded as if they were forced to work together to complement the other's skill sets. That was merely a guess, as the blonde had no idea what the techniques of the Yamanaka, Nara, and Akamiki clans were, but to have a bond among their clans that spanned generations hinted towards his guess being accurate. He had gotten answers to his questions, but none of them pointed to him having any chance of befriending Sasuke and Sakura. To have already been friendly with her teammates before being placed together was a situation that hadn't occurred to Naruto before asking for Ino's opinions, especially given her lack of attention to Shikamaru and Choji during their time at the academy. It didn't seem fair that she had such fortune when he was faced with the exact opposite situation, but then again, he was partly to blame for Sasuke's and Sakura's attitudes towards him. He couldn't really imagine wanting to be friends with his academy self either. The blonde caught Ino's voice asking him something, but he missed the question. Sorry, what was that? Ino huffed. I said, can't you be friends with Billboard Brow and Sasuke-kun? Naruto opened his mouth to offer a derogatory retort about the Uchiha, but his brain reminded him that insulting Sasuke in front of Ino was a bad idea, both for his physical health and for any potential friendship they might kindle. Swallowing his immediate response, he said, well, Sasuke, it burned a little to not tack on the team, like he wanted to, but he felt that that might be something he would have to get used to, isn't really interested in making friends. And Sakura-chan is too obsessed with him to pay me any attention. That lucky Billboard Brow, Ino growled, glaring at her clenched fists, getting placed on a team with Sasuke-kun. It's no wonder she won't pay you any mind with someone as cool as Sasuke-kun nearby. She looked up to see Naruto flinch back at her comment, and immediately gritted her teeth in regret. Sorry, I didn't mean to make it sound like. It's fine. I'm used to it. Ino frowned. It's not fine. You seem like you're trying really hard to be different, even if I don't know why, and I keep treating you unfairly. You didn't even insult Sasuke-kun like you normally do. Yeah, well, I've gotta be nice to him if we wanna be friends, right? The platinum blonde stared at her companion for a moment. Why do you want to be friends with me, anyway? It's not like we ever hung out in the academy or anything. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. Unless this is all one elaborate prank. Naruto stretched out his arms and shook them, hastily stating, no, that's not it at all. He crossed his arms and furrowed his brow, staring intently at his lap. I guess you could say that I wanted to change, and you were the first person I came across who might be willing to give me a chance. So it's just because I was convenient, huh? There was a dangerous timbre in her voice, as if she was offended by his reasoning. Naruto was either oblivious to it or chose to ignore it. Well, at first, I guess you could say that. His head came up at the sound of Ino cracking her knuckles threateningly. But then I thought that you were interesting. Ino's hands dropped into her lap, her face releasing some of her anger. You were willing to teach me more about flowers, and you're not afraid to speak honestly about things, which is a lesson I've come to appreciate recently. I guess I'm saying that I respect your opinions. Oh, well, thanks, sure. Don't think that means I like you anymore or anything, though. She warned. Naruto grinned lopsidedly at her defensiveness before returning to stare at the grass. There was silence between them for a minute, Ino returning to shredding green blades in mild embarrassment for losing her temper so easily, Naruto sitting with his arms crossed, thinking, before the male blonde asked, do you think it's possible for a team to work well together without being friends? Ino looked at the boy before her. The expression on his face wasn't worried or even angry, like she thought it might be, but simply curious. He genuinely wanted to know her opinion on a subject he would most likely have to deal with, perhaps even draw insight from her answer so he could properly mingle with his teammates. I don't know, she replied, opting for the honesty he said he appreciated. Naruto nodded, as if he had expected that answer, and the furrow between his eyebrows grew a little deeper. But, she continued, trying to lighten the tenseness in his face, maybe if you continue to be, not annoying, Naruto suggested. She flinched a little at the candor, wondering why everything she said to Naruto seemed to come out wrong. It never bothered her before, but with him trying to be a better person, and that wasn't quite right either, but she didn't have another way of describing it. It seemed unfair to continue labeling him with old prejudices. Change, she supposed, would come with time. Yeah, maybe if you act around them like you're acting around me, they'll be willing to become your friends. Ino stood up after another bout of silence and brushed off her clothes. Come on, I promised you a lesson, didn't I? I'll even introduce you to Dad if he's still at the shop. Meeting someone's family is a good step to becoming good friends. Naruto seemed to brighten at that announcement. Really? Sure. Plus, he knows a lot more about flowers than I do. And, she added as they began to leave the field, if you ever want to take Asuma-sensei up on his offer to come visit us, you can. Maybe you should pretend sometimes that you came to see Shikamaru and Choji, though, okay. Until I'm used to, whatever this is, she finished, gesturing between them. Yeah, okay. As they walked out of the field, a pair of yellow eyes watched silently from within the confines of a young tree. LLL. 1 week later. Geez, Naruto thought, watching Sakura try to entertain the brown-haired grandchild of some important village elder, this kid is annoying. Is this what it was like for people to be around me? Now I really understand why everyone stayed away from me. If only I had some sort of poison to make him be quiet or sit still or something. His musing on his lack of poisons, something he had intended to work on but kept putting off, was cut short as a toy block clocked him on the side of the head. He grabbed the block off the floor and was prepared to throw it back at the kid when a glare from Sakura stopped him. The pink-haired girl had insisted on entertaining the child herself as Naruto's presence aggravated him. Prejudice, he wondered, passed down from his parents and grandparents, and Sasuke hadn't been interested in what he deemed to be simple babysitting, though Naruto privately thought that Sakura enjoyed the opportunity to show her crush how good she was with children all on her own, anyway. Deciding that getting Sakura on his case wasn't worth the trouble of petty revenge, he released the block and slumped back against the wall he had been leaning against, sliding to the floor. How much longer do we have to be here? Until the client returns, Kakashi reminded him from his position in the corner, nose buried in his book. Naruto grumbled to himself, but then turned to Sasuke, who was seated further along the wall with one arm placed atop his bent knee. Hey, Sasuke, once this mission is over, do you want to train? The Uchiha shot him a dark look. There's no point in training with someone who's beneath me. Now, Sasuke, Kakashi inserted, there's no need to be rude. Sasuke harumphed, but said nothing else, neither did Kakashi. Naruto wondered what the point of giving his opinion was if the silver-haired man wasn't actually going to do anything, and decided to turn his attention to his other teammate. What about you, Sakura-chan? Wanna go do something afterwards? How many times do I have to tell you that I don't want to go on a date with you, Naruto? She replied, half distracted by their charge. No, I didn't mean like, the blonde side. Never mind. He had tried on and off for the past week to make some headway on becoming more friendly with his teammates in an effort to increase their camaraderie, but it had come to no avail. Ino's advice, while sound, had so far been unable to disprove his initial estimation of Team 7, which merely proved that Zetsu was, once again, right. What worked for Ino, who had prior history and a, mostly, good relationship with her teammates, was clearly not working for him. Zetsu had said that his philosophy wasn't necessarily the correct one, just the one most applicable to his lifestyle. Naruto was willing to give other ones a try simply to see if they worked, and because ending up as alone as Zetsu seemed a horrible way to live his life, though as Zetsu had pointed out, he was already well on his way there, but Kakashi's idea of camaraderie was so far proving fruitless. Well, he thought, gazing around the room at the people he was stuck working with, I guess I'll just have to make do for now. With any luck, I won't have to worry about defending or abandoning my supposed comrades. Zetsu was right, I can't rely on anyone but myself. LLL. Naruto sat in a field comprised of short grass and leafy plants, examining the surrounding flora with careful hands. It was still rather early in the morning, and beads of dew allowed his fingers to glide smoothly over the greenery. 5 days had passed since Team 7 had arrived in the Land of Waves, during which time Kakashi had assigned him, Sasuke, and Sakura to learn how to climb trees using only chakra. Fortunately, his time spent in the company of Asuma and Team 10 had given him some insight into that exercise already, allowing him to complete it a little ahead of his dark-haired teammate, who would certainly get the hang of it within the next day. Now, with that under his belt, he had finally found the opportunity to sneak out of the house they were staying in to explore the surrounding area. He thought that Zetsu might be pleased with his initiative to learn about the different vegetation of the various countries, an effort to expand his education on his own merit. It was, perhaps, the one positive aspect of the mission thus far. Despite his own irritation at performing D-rank missions, which were essentially equivalent to chores, a fact that Zetsu found highly amusing, for some reason, it was Sasuke who had politely insisted upon being assigned a mission of a higher caliber. After some thought, the Hokage had given in and assigned him a C-rank mission to escort Tazuna the bridge builder back to his home country of the Land of Waves. Things had gone south pretty quickly after leaving the Hidden Leaf, a pair of missing nin known as the Demon Brothers attacking him along the trail. Though he and Sasuke had held them off with only mild effort, it was Kakashi who had eventually captured and interrogated them. The silver-haired man had then allowed his team to continue the mission by way of majority vote, despite any potential danger ahead. For his own part, Naruto hadn't particularly cared one way or the other about the changed mission classification. While his teammates had been irked at their client's deception, Naruto had, silently, appreciated Tazuna's misdirection. The man had done everything in his power to ensure that his request would be taken, to make sure that his livelihood and the livelihood of his fellows would improve. It felt kind of like a corollary to Zetsu's philosophy of relying only on one's self. In order to accomplish what you wanted, you did whatever it took to get results. Granted, Tazuna was working for the benefit of his entire village instead of for himself, but that was a minor quibble. The theory was still applicable. Still, the blonde had gone along with his teammates' decision simply to explore other lands. There were sure to be different species of flora in the Land of Waves than in the Land of Fire, and searching for them would pose an interesting experience. Unfortunately, more trouble had arrived in the form of a man known as the Demon of the Hidden Mist, Momoki Zabuza. Kakashi had fought the former member of the Mist 7 Shinobi Swordsmen to what had basically amounted to a standstill, as Zabuza had been incapacitated, apparently not killed, as Kakashi had originally assumed, by an accomplice, while the silver-haired man had passed out from chakra exhaustion. Hence Kakashi's focus on preparing his team for the eventual rematch with Zabuza and his associate. None of that really mattered at the current time, though. While Kakashi predicted that Zabuza would attack Tazuna within the next couple of days, Naruto knew that his sensei would be the one fighting the A-rank Nukenon while he and his teammates protected their client. So, in the meantime, the blonde would enjoy the brief break granted to him by his completion of the tree climbing exercise to indulge in botany. The difference in climate between the Land of Waves and the Land of Fire made a nice contrast to what plants grew in each country. While the forests and fields which surrounded and comprised Konoha were filled with brightly colored flowers and deep green canopies, the vegetation in the Land of Waves, at least where he was short and dull. There were tall trees interspersed in clumps throughout the nation, but they didn't seem to have any of the liveliness that permeated the greenery of the Land of Fire. Most interesting were the groves of mangrove trees that decorated the shores of the island nation. Such foliage was unusual in the Land of Fire, where salt water sources capable of growing them were rare. He didn't think they had much in the way of medicinal or poisonous properties, but simply observing the different environments of other countries was rather cool. Naruto's perusal of the plants in the field was interrupted by the soft padding of approaching footsteps stepping on dew-coated grass. Playing it safe, he scooted backwards until he could feel bark against his back before allowing his head to flop to the side, appearing to the world that he had merely fallen asleep against a tree. The footsteps came close enough that Naruto could feel a presence standing beside him. There was a rustle of cloth as the person knelt down, and Naruto fought every instinct that shouted for him to stab a kunai into the gentle hand that was placed on his arm. "You probably shouldn't sleep out here," said a soft voice. Naruto opened his blue eyes with deliberate lethargy, trying to maintain the appearance of having just been sleeping. He blinked slowly to add to the effect. "Oh, I must have fallen asleep while training. Thanks for waking me up." The girl kneeling before him offered up a soft smile. "It was no problem. I wouldn't want you to catch a cold." Naruto crossed his legs and adjusted his position so he was leaning more comfortably against the tree, blue eyes taking in the features of his new companion. Black hair fell down to the middle of her back, framing her large brown eyes. She wore a sleeveless, pink kimono with purple swirls that was held together by a white obi, and the light colors made her pale skin look even more so. A dark choker around her neck was the only contrast to the alabaster color. How come you're out here so early? I was looking for some plants. She blinked doe-like brown eyes at him. Judging by your headband, you must be a ninja. Would you be willing to help me? Zetsu's voice echoed in his head, reminding him that people could only rely on themselves, should be able to take care of themselves, and accomplish tasks by themselves. Naruto chose to ignore it in favor of potentially learning about some of the plants native to the land of waves that he couldn't identify. Sure, he answered. What are you looking for? His companion held out a basket containing several different types of flora. Blue eyes gazed over the collection, widening slightly at some of them. Is something the matter? The girl asked. Naruto shook his head in response. I've just never paid much attention to the different kinds of plants before. Do you know what all these do? He asked, making his eyes bigger to further express his awe. Of course, replied the girl, hands searching the surrounding grasses. When she didn't elaborate, Naruto also got on his hands and knees and began looking for the desired vegetation, though he kept his companion in his periphery, wary of her motives. Although he couldn't say for sure what all the herbs in the girl's basket did, Zetsu's lessons had taught him the properties of some of them. He recognized yarrow and what Zetsu liked to refer to as chase devil, though Naruto knew it better as goatweed, both of which were known for their medicinal properties in healing wounds, relieving pain, and clotting blood, all symptoms which Zabuza would be experiencing. And the former mist shinobi did have an assistant. Naruto mentally tried to rid himself of that thought. Just because he and his teammates were preparing for the demon of the hidden mist to return didn't mean that every random person collecting herbs was suspicious. Sakura had told him the state of Wave's citizens the other day, and it didn't seem like looking for cheap herbal remedies would be uncharacteristic for any one of the natives. Then again, that would provide the perfect cover for any assassin hiding in their midst. He sighed quietly. Zetsu's lessons had nurtured a healthy sense of paranoia that was unbelievably frustrating to deal with. Still, it would do to be cautious around this stranger, just in case. After all, he didn't even know her name. Just as he opened his mouth to ask his companion that exact question, she asked him, "Do you have someone who is important to you?" "Huh, someone important to you," repeated the girl, "a precious person who you would do anything for." Naruto didn't respond right away, instead keeping his attention focused on the greenery he was picking. The question was familiar, if worded differently, to one he had been forced to answer almost a month before, and he wondered if anything had changed in that time. Kakashi had proven to be as distant with his students as he had the first day they'd met, when his answers to his own, getting to know you, questions had been vague and uninformative. The silver-haired man kept himself removed from the interactions of his three genin on missions, interjecting at intervals only when he felt a fight might break out or his students were losing sight of the mission parameters. His protection of the three of them plus Tazuna during Zabuza's initial attack had affirmed his dedication to his own, protect your comrade's speech, which Naruto found himself appreciative of, because holy crap was Zabuza out of their league strength-wise, but otherwise the Jonin had shown himself to be reserved and withdrawn. Unfortunately, that personality quirk had carried over to his training methodology, a trait that Naruto found rather irritating. It was, he felt, a Jonin sensei's duty to teach his students useful skills which would help them in the field, and Kakashi's lessons had so far been quite lacking in substance. The silver-haired man seemed to believe that simply allowing his subordinates to perform D-rank missions would build their teamwork, a quality he continued to place emphasis on, despite all evidence to the contrary of his team embracing it with open arms, to levels sufficient enough to survive in the field. Zetsu had been correct when he had told Naruto not to put his faith in others to assist him, as Kakashi had yet to do so. Not only had his teamwork plan proved to be flawed, but Kakashi had a habit of showing up long past the time he had assigned his team to meet up, resulting in hours wasted doing nothing. After 3 days of confirming this pattern, Naruto had decided that his time would be better spent doing anything else, sleeping, for instance, and hadn't shown up until several hours after Kakashi's designated meeting time. Surprisingly, the Jonin had already been there when he had arrived, and he had reprimanded the blonde for his tardiness, emphasizing that punctuality was an important trait for shinobi. Naruto had quickly pointed out his teacher's hypocrisy, stating that if Kakashi couldn't be bothered to show up on time, then why should he? When Kakashi had shown up late the next day, though not by his usual amount, Naruto had returned the favor by showing up late the day after that. From there, the competition had spiraled into a routine of either Kakashi or Naruto being late, with only a few occasions where they both showed up on time. If the Jonin had reported him to the Hokage, as he'd threatened to do, Naruto had yet to hear anything. But Kakashi and his philosophy promoting teamwork and his lack of training exercises were only one part of the problem. Naruto's teammates were the other part. Sasuke had shown himself to be as antisocial as Naruto had originally predicted and remembered from his academy days. There were moments during certain missions where the dark-haired boy had proven himself capable of working with others, but after a while, Naruto had started to realize that the boy was only doing it either because Kakashi was forcing him to or because he didn't trust his teammates to complete the job successfully. That analysis had been confirmed when Sasuke had gone along with Naruto's convoluted plan to free Kakashi from Zabuza's water prison technique during their first battle only after determining that he couldn't beat Zabuza's water clone on his own. Even then, the Uchiha had been rather skeptical that his teammates' plan would work, probably because it was Naruto's plan, and heaven forbid if he could do anything right. The dark-haired boy's arrogance was perhaps his most vexing personality quirk. Naruto had known of the Uchiha clan years ago. They were honestly hard to miss, patrolling the streets with a red and white fans sewn into the collars of their clothes, and their power had been rumored to be the strongest within Konoha. Their downfall was a travesty, and the blonde felt bad for Sasuke, knowing what it was like to have no family around, but the last Uchiha seemed to be riding the coattails of his clan's reputation. Sure, Sasuke was strong, probably the strongest genin of the graduating year, if not at least the most well-rounded ability-wise, but his inability to grant those he saw beneath him the time of day was grating. Every invitation to hang out together that Naruto had offered the Uchiha in an attempt to befriend him, per Ino's suggestion, had been rejected with some statement about how the blonde was inferior to him. Worse than Sasuke, though, and Naruto was amazed at how that could even be possible, was Sakura. The pink-haired girl had a single-minded determination that centered around only one thought: Sasuke. Her infatuation, crush, love, whatever it was, Naruto honestly wasn't sure how to define it, made her difficult to get along with, especially considering Naruto's prior attitude with respect to both her and Sasuke. No matter how many times he insisted he wasn't asking the kunoichi out on a date, Sakura refused to go anywhere with him alone. Naruto wondered if Sakura's answer would change if he ever tried asking her to do something with him while not in front of Sasuke, but as the pink-haired girl never wanted to be caught alone with him, that theory continued to remain untested. In an effort to get her to change the opinion she had of him from the academy, the blonde had even dropped the chan honorific from her name, so it seemed like he was less interested, and his enthusiasm when confronting her, which used to be unnaturally high thanks to his crush on her, had decreased to a point that interacting with her was no different than interacting with anyone else. It hadn't worked, but Naruto felt better about himself for having gotten over whatever infatuation he had held for his female teammate, regardless. Perhaps the most exhausting characteristic about Sakura was the fact that she had potential as a kunoichi, but lacked the correct mindset to apply it. She had an amazing brain that was capable of storing unbelievable amounts of knowledge, but her keen intellect was wasted pining after the last Uchiha. If the first day of tree climbing was any indication, her chakra control was also phenomenal, a trait rare in ninja, let alone ninja her age. The matter of actually utilizing that potential was the real problem. But the attitudes of all his teammates, Kakashi included, meant that Naruto's attempted foray into befriending the people he was stuck working with had ultimately been unsuccessful. Looking back, the conclusion had been foregone weeks prior, but in fairness to trying new things, the blonde had given his teammates a plethora of chances to change their minds, and subsequently, his opinions of them. Unfortunately, it seemed as if they were unwilling to do so, leaving Naruto to label them as lost causes in his quest for camaraderie. On the other hand, his relationship with Ino had slowly but surely improved over time. While the platinum blonde shared several personality traits with Sakura, a short temper and a strange obsession with Sasuke, Ino's lack of association with the Uchiha on a daily basis meant that she was willing to engage in conversation with Naruto without fear of looking bad in front of her crush. It was a quirk that Naruto had no compunctions taking advantage of, as his association with Ino had so far proven to be the closest thing to a real friendship he had. Ino was interesting. Her tendency to say the first thing that came to mind, heedless of whether it could be construed as an insult, was an idiosyncrasy that Naruto appreciated. In a weird way, it reminded him of his relationship with Zetsu, who stated his opinion blatantly and without a care for the other person's feelings. Honesty, he had discovered, was a valuable trait in the ninja world, if only because of its rarity. Her hesitance in accepting him as a friend, dwindling as it was also an alluring quality. Naruto had always enjoyed a challenge, getting what he couldn't have, or testing the limits of how far he could push social norms, and swaying Ino's low opinion of him, from the days of the academy to one where she didn't mind being seen with him in public, had proven to be just that. She had recently decided that it didn't matter if it was known that they hung out on a semi-regular basis, and although she hadn't said so yet, Naruto felt that his fellow blonde was one step away from willingly calling him her friend. That was a milestone that the Jinchuriki wanted to achieve. His association with Ino had actually had other positive results. For one thing, he had learned a lot more about how Shikamaru, and Choji interacted, which was rather hit and miss, given Ino's bossiness and the two boys' apathy and nonchalance, and his relationship with the two boys had also grown as his visits to Team 10's training grounds had become more frequent. While Asuma wouldn't teach him anything, stating that it wasn't his place to interfere with his colleague's regimen, no matter how much Naruto insisted there was no regimen, the bearded Jonin also never sent Naruto away. Such treatment gave the blonde the opportunity to study things like the tree climbing exercise, though without anyone's guiding hand, learning said tricks was slow. Still, he was gradually teaching himself how to reproduce techniques and skills by observation alone, so it was better than nothing. It had even allowed him to finish Kakashi's training ahead of Sasuke, even if not by much. Actually, it was because he spent much of his free time with Team 10 that he had yet to start focusing on crafting poisons. Well, that and the fact that D-rank missions were hardly of the caliber that required the need for poisons had allowed him to justify, to himself, anyway, putting off creating them. Honestly, the C-rank mission had come as a surprise. He had expected Kakashi to give Team 7 some warning before accepting one. He supposed it was a good lesson about always being prepared for the unexpected. Zetsu probably wouldn't approve of the fact that he was spending more time trying to connect with his peers instead of improving his abilities, but then again, the plant man was so stuck in his ways that anything that opposed them was likely to be looked at as pointless. Fortunately, his status as a genin offered a valid excuse as to why he had less free time than when he and Zetsu had initially met, and so his sessions with the plant man had been sparse enough recently that Zetsu's commentary on his actions was kept to a minimum. Regardless, even with the revelation that he could be friends with Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji, Naruto wasn't sure he could ever do as Kakashi preached, as the Wall of Fire demanded. The members of Team 10 were his comrades, yes, but would he sacrifice his life to save one, or all, of them? He'd certainly protect them if the option was viable, but to lose his own life in the process. That was inane. His worldview was now molded into a strange dichotomy. When it came to Team 7, Naruto knew he could only rely on his own abilities. With Kakashi's indifference, Sasuke's arrogance, and Sakura's incompetence, he had no chance of gaining anything valuable from his association with his teammates. It supported the idea he had picked up from Zetsu, that individualism was the only thing he could believe in. But on the other side was Team 10, a group of peers he had grown to enjoy being around and was even friendly with. He could trust them to some extent, though without working with them, the level he could actually rely on them was questionable. The answer to the girl's question was, no, but Naruto wanted to hear what she would say. Yeah, I do, he finally responded. His companion nodded. That's good. When a person has something important to protect, that's when they can truly become strong. Naruto resisted the urge to snort. He was only becoming stronger because, well, if he was honest with himself, it was because Zetsu had decided to take an interest in him and point out his flawed way of thinking. Zetsu, his tutor, was the only other person of significance within his life, and their relationship was simultaneously simple and complicated. The plant man saw him as a project, or an experiment, a person he took a chance on to pass down his ideals. If Naruto managed to survive the challenges life threw at him on his own merit, he would essentially prove Zetsu's philosophy correct. He wasn't sure he wanted to fully analyze the complexities of his and Zetsu's relationship, so he let any remaining thoughts float away, instead choosing to focus on his companion's words. They sounded suspiciously similar to Kakashi's idealism in their support of camaraderie, though with their own twist of supporting strength over friendship. Given that Naruto's experience with protecting something important was non-existent, and in direct contrast to the things Zetsu had taught, his companion's statement was nothing but empty words. He lifted his head at the sound of rustling clothes. His female companion was rising to her feet. I think I've gathered enough herbs, she informed him. Thank you for your assistance. It was a pleasure meeting you, perhaps we will meet again somewhere. Naruto nodded once, his blue eyes following her movements as she made her way out of the clearing. Yeah, you, too. LLL. This isn't gonna end well, Naruto thought. Team 7 had gone to the bridge to offer their full protection to Tazuna after Kakashi had announced himself fully recovered. In a twist of coincidence that was surely a curse, Zabuza and his assistant had arrived to complete their task of assassinating the bridge builder. While the demon of the hidden mist had immediately occupied Kakashi's attention, his assistant Haku had been ordered to take care of the genin. Of course, Sasuke had decided to take the lead and attack Haku on his own, once more displaying his arrogance in his abilities. To his credit, the Uchiha had actually managed to hold off Zabuza's assistant for a short while, proving himself marginally faster than the fake hunter Nin and capable of avoiding his attacks. Up until the point where Haku had created a dome of ice mirrors to trap both the dark-haired boy and the nearby blonde. Then he had melded into the mirrors and started peppering them with senbon. Naruto made a mental note to get a lot better at throwing senbon. If he could eventually achieve Haku's levels of speed and accuracy, he would become a force to be reckoned with, especially if his weapons were poisoned. But that would require surviving Haku's attacks. He and Sasuke now stood back to back, watching and waiting for their opponent to make his next move. Any ideas? He asked his teammate. Try to avoid getting a serious injury, Sasuke said. His chakra must have a limit, meaning that he can't keep this up forever. He's already starting to slow down, and I can't counterattack and watch over you at the same time. Naruto grunted in both acknowledgement and annoyance. Sasuke was clearly still underestimating the blonde's skills if he thought that Naruto wasn't aware of that factoid already. Kunai were clenched tightly in both of his hands to better block any needles Haku sent their way. There was a clang of metal on metal as he deflected several senbon aimed at his vitals, wincing as he felt others pierce his legs and shoulders. Soon enough, it wouldn't matter that he had avoided being hit in vital spots because he'd be rendered immobile enough to not be able to dodge anything. The next several moments were devoted to the two genin deflecting and attempting to dodge Haku's senbon, gathering enough metal needles in their bodies to resemble human pincushions. You've done well to avoid dying thus far, resounded Haku's voice from everywhere, but I can no longer afford to waste time. Every image of the ice user manipulated a single hand through seals at a blazing speed. Haijutsu, Sensatsu Susho. Naruto felt an impact on his back and went sailing forward as 1,000 needles created from moisture in the air cascaded down on his previous position. Rolling clumsily into a crouch, he watched as Sasuke finished leaping away from the impact spot, the Uchiha's eyes a blood red. The blonde wasn't sure if he was more impressed at having survived the attack or at Sasuke saving his life by kicking him out of harm's way. Then Sasuke let out a strangled gurgle and fell forward, two senbon protruding through his neck. As his teammate's body collapsed, Naruto could see that Haku was in the mirror behind the Uchiha, his arm extended from having thrown the projectiles. Your friend managed to save you from a death blow, it is unfortunate that he was left vulnerable. And now his sacrifice will have been in vain. Haku sped out of the mirror with senbon clenched between his fingers, and Naruto, in a maneuver that would likely prove ineffective, prepared to throw a punch to forestall his imminent death. Haku stumbled suddenly, and Naruto's fist impacted the boy's porcelain mask with a force born more from Haku's momentum than his own body. The blonde blinked as the ice mirrors surrounding him melted into water and splashed to the ground, then quickly went to the downed Haku and held a kunai to his throat. Well, not sure what happened, but at least I'm alive. LLL. Naruto walked into the area he now considered to be Zetsu's forest, grateful to be back in his usual environment alive and whole after the fiasco in the Land of Waves. Though the entire situation had been resolved, the progression of events had been nothing if not hectic. His suspicions about the woman in the forest had been proven correct when, upon the removal of Haku's mask, the two had proven to be one and the same. While killing his enemy had been the most prudent idea, Haku had taken the situation out of his hands by utilizing the body flicker technique to place himself in the path of Kakashi's lightning cutter, saving Zabuza's life. The boy's death had been immediate, and after an exchange of words between Zabuza and Kakashi, the former's employer had shown up and broken their contract. Such treachery had prompted the demon of the hidden mist to charge into the group of mercenaries his employer had brought along, killing several before taking out the head honcho himself. Naruto's shadow clones had dissuaded the rest of the mercenaries from trying anything else, and Team 7 had remained in the land of waves to watch over the completion of the bridge that was supposed to save the country's economy, and to let Sasuke, who hadn't actually died, recuperate before returning to Konoha. After the incident in the Dome of Mirrors, Naruto hadn't been sure what to think about his male teammate. Sasuke had performed a selfless act to save him, which, considering the boy's personality, was rather uncharacteristic. Naruto had thought that something might change between them, and thus prove his previous analysis wrong, but once the Uchiha had recovered, their status quo had returned to normal, and the blonde had written off the act as a spur-of-the-moment decision that was unlikely to ever be repeated. In fact, if at all possible, Sasuke's attitude towards him had gotten even worse after it had been revealed that Naruto had been the one to incapacitate Haku. It was almost as if the Uchiha resented him for taking out the enemy when he had been unable to. "Oh, Naruto-kun, you're back. Was your mission successful?" The blonde looked up to find his tutor gazing at him from the trunk of an oak tree. Yeah, I guess." He paused before continuing, "Hey, Zetsu, can I ask you something? Would it stop you if I denied your request?" Naruto plowed forward, ignoring the plant man's snarky attitude. "When I was in the land of waves, we ran into a Nukanon by the name of Momoki Zabuza. He said that, in the world of shinobi, there are only those who use, and those who are used," Black Zetsu recited. White Zetsu picked up where his counterpart left off, stating, "He also said that shinobi are simply tools. Quite a model shinobi. How did you know that?" Naruto stammered, shocked. "We were there," White Zetsu offered simply. "Did you think that we would allow you to voyage outside of the village with only your team for backup? What would happen if you were attacked by someone beyond your capabilities and killed? Our investment would be for naught. You followed me to the land of waves." Naruto had thought that his tutor was relatively indifferent to what happened to him, but with this development, it was entirely possible that he was mistaken. Perhaps Zetsu, in his own detached, independent way, actually cared about his well-being. That was unexpected. Everything Zetsu had said pointed to him being completely apathetic to what happened to Naruto. By the plant man's own logic, it was the blonde's duty to fight his own battles and be dependent on his own abilities, and if he couldn't, he would suffer the consequences. But this new revelation pointed to Zetsu actually displaying some modicum of concern, maybe, for his pupil. If Naruto had misjudged Zetsu, someone whom he thought he had figured out, was it possible he had prematurely judged his teammates as well? Maybe, but then again, did it really matter all that much? He had already made peace with the fact that he and his teammates didn't get along. What did it matter if his opinions were wrong or biased? With the amount of opportunities he'd extended to them to be, at the very least, civil, experience had taught him that he didn't even want to associate with them beyond what he already had to. He would keep his opinion open to any changes he observed on the off chance his preliminary analysis was incorrect, but otherwise there was no reason to fret over whether he was right or wrong about his teammates' personalities. Zetsu continued talking. "We wanted to take a vacation, and where better to go than to assure you weren't misled while away. The two mercenaries that tried attacking the house you were staying in weren't very tasty, though. Maybe next time we should go to the land of Earth," White Zetsu suggested to his counterpart. "Their people taste much better, more meat." Naruto shuddered a little at that. Zetsu's need to eat people was something that he still had yet to get used to, despite having almost been the plant man's meal himself. He shook his head to rid himself of the mental image. "So, you were there," the blonde verified. "Yes. How else do you think you survived the boy with the Hyoten Kekkei Genkai? That was you. Naruto-kun, you need to learn to increase your observational skills." The Jinchuriki opened his mouth to protest, but Black Zetsu cut across him. Without any explanation, your opponent tripped before being able to deliver the finishing blow. Didn't you find that suspicious? Well, yeah, Naruto admitted, but he trailed off as the sight of a vine slithering along the forest floor caught his attention. Nature is unforgiving. We were watching from the tree line, and when you appeared to be in danger, we interfered. You need to grow strong enough to defend yourself. We won't always be around. Nor do we want to be. That's, well, Naruto wanted to say, thank you, but he felt that Zetsu wouldn't care. The plant man probably already knew he appreciated the help. He shook his head vigorously. That's all beside the point. I wanted to ask you about what Zabuza said. There is nothing to say. We agree with Zabuza. You do. Of course. We would not be as we are now if his statement was untrue. Naruto fell silent at that. Zetsu had never told him outright about what had happened in his past, and although the blonde had been curious, the urge to pry had been tempered by both Black Zetsu's irritability and respect for his tutor's privacy. From hints Naruto had picked up in conversation, he could determine that whatever had happened to Zetsu in Kasagakure was not something the plant man had willingly partaken in. His musing was interrupted by the dual-toned man. You claim that your goal is to become Hokage, right? Ah. Well, as Hokage, the lives of every shinobi and civilian within the village are yours to command. They are your tools, the implements by which your will is carried out. A chain of command is established by assigning those of lower rank to serve under those above them, from Genin to Chunin to Jonin. The Anbu work directly for the Hokage, carrying out his will no matter what it might be. In other words, they are also his tools. White Zetsu's yellow eye blinked at him. Don't you remember what we told you about your Hatei 8, Naruto-kun? Yeah, but I guess I never really thought of what that meant for me. He frowned at the ground, lost in thought. I don't want to be someone's tool, so that would mean I'd have to become Hokage, right? Why did you want to become Hokage originally? Oh, I wanted people to respect and acknowledge me. Black Zetsu laughed cruelly. What a worthless dream. To become the leader of a village, whether recognized as a Kage or not, you must already possess respect. Either that or power, and often the two go hand in hand. With neither in your grasp, your capacity to become Hokage is a fool's errand. Beyond that, the plant man's lighter side continued, the Hokage is not an all-powerful position. Naruto cocked his head to the side. What do you mean? Although he reigns over the citizens of the village, the Hokage must still answer to other powers. The council, the clan heads, his advisors, the daimyo, the Hokage must please many other parties to remain at the top. It is a delicate balance that is more trouble than it is worth, and your desire to reach that position is nonsensical. Why would you want to be in charge of the village and its people? Do you care about their lives? That argument sounded familiar, and Naruto realized with a start that it was practically the same thing Zetsu had told him when describing Konoha's belief in the will of fire. Remembering the conversation, Naruto arrived at the conclusion that the Hokage had to be the firmest believer of the will of fire within the entire village, and he understood with startling clarity that he would never possess the correct state of mind to actually take up the mantle. For one thing, if what Zetsu said was correct, he had no sway within the village, which not only meant that his reason for wanting the position was backwards, but it was also impossible to achieve. To erase the years of prejudice and animosity the villagers held for him, whether due to the Kyuubi or his prankster reputation, would take more than a few years, he supposed, if he was being optimistic. Konoha was a huge village, and getting everyone to change their opinion of him was an unlikely occurrence. It was likely only working with Ino, Choji, and Shikamaru because of coincidence, he and Ino sharing an interest in flowers, followed by her long-standing relationship with her teammates and his prior affiliation with them in the academy, that he would be unable to repeat for the general populace. Beyond that, experimenting with trying to form bonds with his teammates had taught him that he really didn't believe in the will of fire. Naruto didn't have anyone precious enough to want to throw his life away for, nor a reason to, given everyone's treatment of him, and that seemed to be a requirement to become Hokage. He could appreciate the sacrifices the previous Hokages had made so far. The Yondaime, after all, was still a heroic, amazing man, but the blonde wanted to live past the age of 30. Not that that was a likely scenario with a career as a shinobi, but the likelihood probably increased when you weren't expected to lay down your life for the sake of the village. His revelation posed a problem, though. If not Hokage, what did he want to become? Strength was certainly a prerequisite of whatever he wanted to do, as survive was a good priority, but to achieve a sufficient level would require years of work. In the meantime, he would be forced to work as a tool of his village, but remaining in that position was not something he wanted. He wanted to become self-sufficient, self-reliant, kind of like Zetsu, just less creepy. However, if even the Hokage was a tool, what career path would lead him towards his desired lifestyle? He looked up at his tutor. Hey, Zetsu, you're a shinobi but not a tool, right? How'd you do that? The plant man's mouth stretched into a slightly maniacal grin. You leave. Only by abandoning all which you are familiar with can you achieve such a status. When you're on your own, the only person you answer to is yourself. That makes sense. In order to not be treated as a tool, he had to make it so that there was no one else in his life that he had to listen to. But to abandon the hidden leaf. That was a little hard to imagine. The mission to the land of waves had taught him a lot about what being a missing nin would consist of. Kirigakure apparently had an entire branch of Anbu devoted to hunting down their renegade shinobi, who was to say that Konoha didn't have a similar system. As a genin, it would be near impossible to escape the hidden leaf and hope to avoid any shinobi that was sent to track him down. But beyond the impracticality of doing that, Naruto wasn't sure he really wanted to leave the hidden leaf. Despite the lack of any real comrades, barring Team 10, Konoha was still his home, and he had nowhere else to go if he did abandon it. Then again, he considered, glancing at Zetsu, his tutor had left his home, though probably under extenuating circumstances. The plant man instead roamed the world without any real aim, simply enjoying the splendor of his surroundings. Naruto frowned. That lifestyle was contingent upon Zetsu being able to fend for himself, which came back around to being strong enough to do whatever he wanted. The whole ideology was rather cyclic. Trying to escape the confining role of being a tool was proving to be rather difficult. Well, it wasn't like he had to make a decision right now. He was sure to be stuck within Konoha for the foreseeable future, so he would focus instead on increasing his abilities and discovering his own niche within the Hidden Leaf's hierarchy, regardless of having to obey orders. That would require intense focus on his shurikenjutsu and physical conditioning to become at least as good as Haku had been. That was a good first plateau to aim for, considering the skills he was hoping to specialize in. If nothing else, the mission to the Land of Waves had taught him that he needed to buckle down and start taking his training seriously. And he would actually have to start utilizing all the knowledge Zetsu had imparted upon him. Zetsu, he began, features settled in a determined expression, I need a way to carry around different plants and poisons. Any ideas? The former Kusa nin grinned. We have just the thing for you, Naruto-kun. LLL. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.